We'll move on to Big Arnold. Oh, what are you doing? You can't say this. I don't believe anything Arnold's saying personally. Like, I don't think he actually thinks that the Democrats are the worst. We can be reminded if he was a California Republican governor and how little of republicanism he actually did. We can talk about his problem with Trump, where he was supposedly he replaces Trump on The Apprentice, and he said how much better it's going to be. That fails. He hates Trump. We can recall how he says you shouldn't have rights during coronavirus time. And
And
now he's saying the Democrats want to mess up every city in America, Eric.
yeah, well, I don't know if I believe that he believes it, but it is quite I mean, I think it's pretty obviously true. And let's not forget that he replaced a man named Gray Davis in California who was recalled. So just think about how long this corruption has been happening, right? Like, how does a place like California recall their governor? Then they elect the governor who was the last Republican governor of this state. And you fast forward 20 years, and Gavin Newsom becomes the governor after destroying San Francisco. And then he faces a recall election, but somehow wins. So this we can sort of connect this to Hillary Clinton losing, and now that regime, that establishment knows that they are not going to let these losses happen anymore, right? So what happened in 2002 or whatever when Arnold won as a quote unquote Republican, they now know we're not going to let that happen again. If you think for one split second California will ever see somebody who's not 100% on board with the Democratic establishment hackery quote unquote leadership, then you're wrong. So, and then you have New York as well. Just let's remember that Andrew Cuomo replaced Elliot Spitzer, who was ousted for hooking up with high end prostitutes, right? So, out of all the places, California and New York, the most disgusting blue bastions of liberal nonsense, have these long histories of quite literally ousting corrupt governors and other corrupt politicians. Lieutenant governor under Kathy Hochul, by the way, who was ousted, and we don't. I don't think that this is happening because people are seeing it and they're saying no, get rid of him. There's probably some infighting going on, right? So Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin probably closed the deal that Kathy Hochul wasn't in on, so she had to get rid of him. But my point is, now with Arnold here, him saying that the Democrats want to destroy everything, whether he believes it or not, up for debate. But it is true. And we've seen governors in both of these states, California and New York, for the past 2 decades get recalled and do completely corrupt things. But for whatever reason, whether it's the population that can't connect the dots and they keep electing these people, or something far more sinister, that regime is not going to let themselves be outvoted. But sorry, I got off track there a little bit. Let's see what Arnie has to say.
This is actually a good segment, and it's interesting to me because this is on Rob Lowe's podcast, and I'll bring up one from Dax Shepard's podcast recently too. But he says Lowe told Schwarzenegger that Dreyer, the former congressman from California, said that Republicans stand for, in no particular order, strong military, low taxes, less government, more personal freedoms, and then noted he was forgetting one. Schwarzenegger then reminded Lowe that he was missing the ideal for strong law enforcement. Lowe then asked Schwarzenegger, who is former governor of California, what he thinks Democrats stand for. Ruin your cities, he said. That's what the Democrats would say. We're about ruining the cities. We want to F up every city in America. It seems to be the theme right now. When a shocked Lowe asked why that would be, Schwarzenegger replied, I have no idea.
I have an idea.
I think he knows the reason too. And the reason why I think that he might be telling the truth on this is because Schwarzenegger is from Austria. He's lived the American dream. He has been in all the movies, of course, and he's seen what California can do, even if it has the corruption laden in it. As we talk about, you and I talk about the good old days when it was just money laundering or whatever it might have been between politicians. He's seen all that, and he sees that probably everybody can get their beak wet along with the American public. And the fact that he no longer sees America as a place where it can be strong, you can love America, you can wave a flag, you can go to the movies, stuff like that is remember he grew up in America in the 80s and 90s. So that's probably what he wants as well, like so many other people. And
Yes,
it's not a
the
racial
old
thing.
that old style corruption, right? Like, give it,
Yeah.
like you said, you could get your beak wet without destroying everything in your path. But
Yeah.
I wanted to say, I spoke with not yesterday, but about a week or so ago in San Francisco, and it's really sad how you can't ever record the truth. It becomes very difficult to record the truth, right? So if you talk to
Mhm.
people, they will give you the truth, but as soon as even something as small as an iPhone comes out, then they tense up and can't say anything. And I get it, especially if you're a cop. But the cop made a very good point that I think we all know, but he was unafraid to say it to me candidly, that the reason San Francisco is in the state that it's in, is because if anybody cleans it up, they don't get to keep asking for money. Very simply, I'm paraphrasing a
Mhm.
little bit there, but he's like, well, he started naming off like 3, 4 different like quote unquote city programs, like city
Of
ambassador
course.
this and community outreach and all this stuff where the political class, the London breeds of the world, can constantly be asking for more money because and the money vanishes into thin air. It gets siphoned, it gets filtered through pockets of bureaucrats all over the place. None of it actually goes to help the people, because if it did, then something might actually get fixed and then they wouldn't have any reason to ask for more money. That was a cop. That was a San Francisco police officer saying that.
Well, yeah, it's like they spend how many millions every year in California on homelessness, and that doesn't really do anything.
Well,
The I wanted to mention how it's interesting that some of these actors, Rob Lowe's been around for 35 years. He's got enough money. Dax Shepard, who's no longer with his extremely left corporate political loving wife, Kirsten Bell, had this guy who's on Queer Eye for the Straight Guy on his show, and he made him cry because he didn't just agree with everything he said.
I
This
forgot about this. Was like a week or so ago, right? I
was a
forgot about
couple
this
weeks
one.
ago. Yeah, let me see the
Okay.
date on this. September 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
Um, and this guy was calling him anti-trans. So Dax Shepard was saying that he asked him whether or not the New York Times is a left-wing paper, and Van Ness, this guy, said it is not because it has questioned sex changes in hormones for children. Therefore, it is anti-trans, so it can't be left-wing. Shepard then insisted the paper simply challenged and asked questions about the issue. Some people are very uncomfortable about teenagers transitioning, Shepard said. Again, this is a guy who punked late 90s, early 2000s, maybe just early 2000s, um, in a couple movies back in the day, early 2000s. And that was liberal enough for him to be in California, and he is extremely leftist as it is. That was liberal enough for him, right? Now he's in his 40s, maybe 50s, and he's like, "Wait a minute, doesn't anybody understand that this is not left, or this isn't hardcore Republican to not want to have teenagers be transitioning? How do we know?" He says, "How do we know that the person's not going to change their mind?" Then there's another counter argument: if they kill themselves, going to your argument, Eric, where they always say it's life or death. If they kill themselves, then that's really effing permanent. To even question it makes you an enemy. I don't think that's the way forward. And then this guy who very much sounds like a teenage girl, because that's what he wants to be. He wants to be able to have this attitude of like a pretty girl who doesn't have to answer any questions. I feel like I'm talking to my dad before he shifted to his legitimate concerns about transgender athletes. This whole thing, Eric, I feel like I'm talking to my dad. So this isn't an answer. I'm going to shame you for having an opinion that I have equated with somebody who's old and therefore uncool. And he talks about boys playing in girls' sports. He was saying that it doesn't matter, it shouldn't matter actually, if boys compete against girls, because 99% of kids who want to play sports aren't going to go to the Olympics. So if you don't have Olympic aspirations, Eric, which is fundamentally a misunderstanding of sports and which sports go into what professional league, then why shouldn't boys be allowed to dominate girls if most people don't become professional athletes? Because he's extremely, he's a gay man, he's extremely leftist and into pop culture. He doesn't understand how anyone could like sports, so he's saying, what does it matter if boys play girls in sports? And then he said, I could just cry because I'm so like tired of having to like fight for little kids because they just want to be included. I wish that people were as passionate about little kids being able to like be included or grow up as they were about fictitious women's fairness in sports. I'm very tired. And then he goes on
Yeah,
to
yeah,
say
bro.
that
I'm tired too, bro. Yeah,
you're a
we're all tired.
misogynist, but he didn't want to say last thing. He didn't want to call Dax Shepard transphobic, and he makes a point of saying that. And I think he didn't want to say that is because Dax Shepard is higher on the Hollywood political totem pole than he is. So he knows that if he labels Dax Shepard as transphobic, that's a bad thing. Dax Shepard's gonna be like, I'm gonna make sure you can never work again. So he made sure to stay clear of that. But he did say he was trans misogynist, which makes no sense.
Well, it's just
So
another thing.
I just thought it was interesting that these, you know, left wing Hollywood guys are saying, no, this stuff is too left wing for me now. And it's even Rob Lowe and Dax Shepard, who are as, liberal Hollywood as you can
Veterans, yeah.
be.
Vets in the space for last at least 2 decades.
Turn it up, Jordan.